Whenever our family moved the livestock down to the winter pasture, my parents made sure my younger brother, Cody, had a detailed topographic map and a top-of-the-line satellite GPS watch strapped to his wrist. I was given nothing. I was expected to trek 20 miles on foot across hundreds of rolling, featureless hills, blind searching for wherever they'd pitched camp. I used to quiet the ache in my chest by telling myself it was temporary. I just had to study hard, get into the county magnet school, and earn my way out. When the state entrance exam results came back, I ranked first in the entire county. But my mandatory health clearance forms were left behind at the old cabin. That was the day the blizzard slammed into the high plains. I got trapped in the whiteout, freezing and lost, and begged for help over the long-range CB radio. My mother's voice came back through the static, sharp with irritation. "Marin, stop hogging the line. The signal's terrible out here, and Cody's trying to stream his online math class." My father grabbed the receiver. "You've got eyes, don't you? Look at the damn stars. You're 16 years old. How do you manage to get lost in open country?" I spent that night huddled in a drift of dry snow, shivering until my limbs went numb. By the time I made it to the county hospital, 3 of my toes were dead with frostbite and had to be amputated. I missed the mandatory medical checkup, and with it, my admission deadline. 2 weeks later, I limped back to the new ranch house on crutches. My parents were huddled around the cast-iron stove, roasting prime beef ribs for Cody. My father looked up, his brow furrowed in annoyance. "Where the hell have you been running wild for 2 weeks? You knew the stalls were piling up. Couldn't be bothered to come back and shovel manure?" No one asked why I walked with a heavy, unnatural tilt. My dream of leaving the plains had been buried out in that storm, alongside the pieces of my feet left behind in the surgical trash. This land was too big, its horizon too wide, and I was finally realizing I would never find a home here. It was time to make my own way out. I braced myself against the doorframe, my palm flat against the cold wood. Inside, Cody was trimming the charred, crispy edges off a beef rib and offering them to my mother. Darlene glanced at me, her mouth tightening into a thin line. "So you finally decided to show up. Smelling like a damn hospital, too. Shut the door, Marin. You're letting all the heat out." My father, Lyle, sliced off a thick piece of brisket and dropped it into Cody's bowl. His voice was flat, dry as winter grass. "Where'd you run off to for half a month? Barn's a disaster zone. You know better than to shirk your chores." Cody held up a grease-stained bone, the screen on his blue Garmin watch flaring bright against his small wrist. "Why were you walking like that, Marin? Mom said there's no meat left for you anyway. Dad said if you aren't here to work, you don't count as part of dinner." I swallowed hard, glancing down at my heavy winter boots. The nurse at the county clinic had sliced open the leather toe boxes so the thick, blood-crusted gauze could fit inside. The empty gaps where my toes used to be rubbed raw against the stiff leather. Every step felt like stepping on broken glass. My mother thrust a bare bone with a scrap of gristle toward me. "Here, eat this, then go clear the snow off the porch. It's freezing tonight, and I don't want to hear you whining about the cold." I didn't take it. Lyle tapped the point of his skinning knife against the pine table. Thump, thump. "Your mother offers you food and you stand there pouting? You've gone soft from those books, Marin. A girl with her head in the clouds always ends up getting dragged down by reality." "I'm not hungry," I said quietly. "I'll go to the barn." My mother's shoulders visibly dropped, relief washing over her face as she turned to pour fresh milk into Cody's water bottle. "See, your sister knows how to be useful. Not like you, crying after 2 pages of homework." Cody stuck out his tongue at me. "Hey Marin, you're doing my algebra tonight, right? Mrs. Gable said if I fail another test, she's calling Dad." Lyle chuckled, shaking his head fondly. "That's what your sister's good grades are for, son. She can score top of the county all day long, but at the end of the day, a girl can't inherit a ranch." My hand tightened around the smooth hickory handle of my crutch, the worn wood digging into the old calluses on my palm. I didn't say a word. The afternoon the state test scores came out, I had run 6 miles back to the old cabin with my transcript clutched in my fist, my soles worn down to the rubber. I found my parents butchering a lamb to celebrate Cody getting a passing 60 on his middle school finals. My mother had taken my transcript with bloody hands, glanced at the bold, "number 1 in district" printed at the top, and used it to prop up the wobbly leg of the butcher block. "What good is a high score for a girl?" she'd muttered. "You'll just marry a hand from the next county anyway. Better off learning to manage the herd." By nightfall, the paper was translucent with tallow, my name dissolved in grease. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It was a text from Mrs. Porter, my guidance counselor from the county district. "Marin, I'm so sorry about the medical clearance deadline. With your scores, you belonged in the Honors Academy. How is your foot healing? I'm looking into a state-funded grant for special education track students and vocational stipends. Please don't give up." I stood in the shadow of the barn wall, reading the text twice. My fingers were too cold to type a reply. Cody snuck out behind the hay bales, pressing a greasy piece of lukewarm brisket into my palm. "Mom said I couldn't save any for you. he whispered, looking around guiltily. Don't tell. I handed it back. Eat it yourself. He blinked, confused. Since when do you not want the crispy edge? You used to fight me for it. I don't want it anymore, I said softly. I picked up the flathead shovel and began scraping frozen manure off the concrete floor, tossing it into the wheelbarrow. Every time I put weight on my right foot, a sharp, hot agony shot up my calf. The next morning, the sound of metal slamming against wood woke me. My mother slammed her heavy steel cash box onto the kitchen table, the quarters and dimes inside rattling like gravel. She held up a crumpled receipt from the county hospital, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. There's $400 missing from the feed fund. What did you do, steal from us to run off to the county clinic? What kind of girl goes to a hospital just because her feet got a little cold? Lyle sat near the door, oiling his leather reins. He didn't look up. Marin, that money's earmarked for Cody's private tutoring when he moves to the city next year. Don't be selfish. I smoothed out the receipt on the counter. Mrs. Porter paid that. The doctor took me in because the tissue was blackening. I didn't touch your cash box. My mother snatched the paper, her eyes skimming the red official stamp at the bottom. Her face turned blotchy with anger. You let an outsider pay for your doctor's bill? Do you have any idea how that makes us look? People will say we don't take care of our own daughter. You didn't, I said simply. The room went dead silent. Cody stood near the doorway, his new blue wool scarf wrapped tight around his neck. He looked from me to my mother, his voice small. Mom, did Marin really lose part of her foot? Darlene glared at him. Mind your business and get your coat on for school. Lyle stood up, pulled the steel box toward him, and reset the combination lock with 4 sharp clicks. Then he unclipped a small brass key from his ring, threaded it through a piece of red paracord, and hung it around Cody's neck. From now on, Cody keeps the key, Lyle announced, his tone clipped. Saves us from people with light fingers making us look bad. I stared at the red cord around my brother's neck. It was always like this. When we moved pastures, the maps were folded neatly and tucked into Cody's coat pocket. The GPS watch, the spare lithium batteries, the thermos of hot soup, all Cody's. My directions had always been a single sentence thrown over my father's shoulder. Follow the fence line. You'll find us. My mother balled up the medical bill and threw it into the wood stove. The flames licked the edges, turning Mrs. Porter's signature to black ash in seconds. Your feet are fine enough to stand on. Don't use a little frostbite to hold this family hostage. Your brother's going places, Marin. You're his sister. You don't drag him down. I leaned down to pull the charred scrap out, but the fire caught it fully, leaving nothing but smoke. Lyle clasped my mother's wrist, stepping in with the heavy-handed authority of a man who thought he was being generous. All right, Darlene. If she didn't steal it, drop it. Marin, wipe that sour look off your face. You don't have to work the outdoor fences tomorrow. Just stay in the house and cook the meals. Darlene scoffed. Getting off easy if you ask me. What about the barn? I asked. Lyle pushed the steel box into the top cabinet. You stay put. Don't go wandering into town making a scene. Last winter, I came down with a fever so high the world turned into a white blur. A spring foal had slipped out of the pen during a draft, and my father had thrust the halter into my burning hands anyway, telling me to track it down by the frozen creek. When I brought the foal back, my boots soaked through with icy mud, my mother hadn't checked my forehead. She had rubbed the foal's belly, sighing with relief that the livestock hadn't lost any weight. I hadn't cried then either. Cody touched the key at his throat, watching me carefully. Marin, if your toes are gone, does that mean you can't run fast enough to help me flush out rabbits anymore? I looked at his clean, soft hands. You can catch them yourself. He pouted. But I'm not fast enough. My mother stuck her head out from the kitchen nook. Don't go corrupting your brother, Marin. He's going to work an office job in the city someday. You just need to know how to roast meat and keep a fire going. At dinner, I set down the stew, hot biscuits, and gravy. Lyle took one sip of the broth and frowned. Needs salt. You spend 2 weeks in a hospital bed and forget how to season soup. Darlene pushed her bowl back across the table. Make another pot. Cody's got midterms coming up, he can't be eating bland food. Cody looked like he wanted to say something, but he just tucked the key deeper inside his collar. I picked up the heavy cast iron pot to carry it back to the stove. My weak right ankle gave out, sending a splash of boiling broth over the back of my hand. The skin blistered instantly. My mother didn't look at my hand. She jumped up, staring at the braided wool rug under my feet. That rug is brand new. You ruin it with grease. How are you going to pay for it? I used the hem of my apron to wipe the floor clean. Late that night, while the house slept and the slow, rhythmic breathing of my family filtered through the heavy curtain divider, I used a small seam ripper to open the inner lining of my winter coat. Inside, I slipped the state grant application Mrs. Porter had mailed to me, along with my birth certificate. Then, stitch by painstaking stitch, I sewed the lining closed again. The next morning, Lyle was revving his snowmobile on the driveway when I walked out and held the interview notice in front of his handlebars. He glanced at the date, then swiped his leather-gloved hand to push the paper away. The county district office is 40 miles out. You think I'm driving a limping girl all that way for some pipe dream? Cody's got a weekend off and wants to see the snowmobile races in town. Stop acting so bitter and needy. Cody was sitting in the side sled, his GPS watch secured over his parka sleeve, his helmet tilted sideways. Marin, I really want to go to the races. Can't you just go to your thing later? The interview is at 10 in the morning, I said, my voice steady against the roar of the engine. If I miss it, I lose the grant. Darlene came out, handing Cody a hot thermos. She grabbed my shoulder, yanking my canvas shoulder bag down to check inside. Stop making a fool of yourself in town. What district school wants a cripple? Stay home, work hard, and in 2 years we'll find a decent ranch hand for you to marry. At least he'll bring a couple of cows into the herd. Lyle revved the engine again, his patience gone. Feed the stock before noon. I'll bring you back some fried bread from the track concession stand tonight. I pulled my bag back over my shoulder. Okay, go ahead. Darlene narrowed her eyes at me. Don't go trying to walk out to the highway on your own. There's no traffic out here. You fall in a ditch, nobody's coming to dig you out. I leaned on my wooden crutches and walked past the idling snowmobile. The track belt kicked up a spray of icy dirt, dusting the bottom of my trousers. Cody turned back, shouting over the engine noise. Marin, finish my English packet for me. I want to play on my tablet tonight. I kept walking and didn't look back. The trek to the main county highway was 12 miles long. The first 4 miles were narrow cattle trails, choked with packed snow. The rest was a rutted dirt road, frozen solid and split open by the frost. Every time the wooden tip of my crutch sank into the mud, I had to exert all my strength to pull it free before taking another step forward. By mile 3, my right ankle was soaked. I could feel the hot, sticky dampness spreading through the thick gauze inside my boot. Fresh blood. My phone had no signal. I remembered when Cody was little and terrified of the wind howling against the timber walls. He used to drag his blanket into my narrow cot, shivering against my side. I had taught him his alphabet. I had taken the blow when a rogue steer charged the pen, leaving a scar across my shoulder. I had saved my stubby pencil leads, so I could sharpen them perfectly for his small hands. When I grow up, Marin, he had promised me then, I'm going to buy you the brightest watch in the world, so you never get lost. Now the brightest watch was strapped around his own wrist. A dusty green Ford pickup pulled up beside me just as I reached the asphalt of the county road. Mrs. Porter slammed the driver's side door open, rushing toward me with a large steel thermos in her hands, her face pale. Marin, what on earth are you doing walking out here alone? I called your house this morning, and your mother told me you were throwing a tantrum and refused to get out of bed. I braced my crutch against the gravel shoulder. They went to the snowmobile races. Mrs. Porter's jaw tightened. Her lips trembled slightly, but she controlled herself, unscrewing the thermos and pressing hot tea into my cold hands. Get in the truck. Right now. Your foot is bleeding through your leather, child. Why didn't you say something? I climbed into the passenger seat. My bloody boot heel left a dark smudge on her rubber floor mat. Mrs. Porter didn't say another word. She just set her jaw, threw the truck into gear, and drove. We reached the district administration building 10 minutes after the interviews had officially begun. Mrs. Porter guided me down the polished linoleum hallway. The administrator at the door frowned, checking his clipboard. She's late. Regulations say if a candidate misses the call window, they're disqualified. Mrs. Porter shoved my transcript and my hospital discharge summary into his hands. She took first place in the entire county state assessment. She was trapped in a blizzard 2 weeks ago, and her family refused to drive her here today. She just walked 4 miles on an amputated foot to reach the highway. Give her 5 minutes. The man looked down at the blood soaking through my boot tip. His eyes softened. Go on in, he whispered. Good luck. Inside, the panel of 3 evaluators looked up. The lead interviewer, a woman with graying hair and kind, sharp eyes, reviewed my file. Marin, why are you applying for the state residential grant in special education? With your test scores, you could easily qualify for the top academic track in the capital. I sat in the chair, resting my hands on my knees. Through the rough wool of my coat, my fingers traced the sewn edge where my application form had been hidden. Because I want to go somewhere, I said softly, where I don't need a satellite watch just to be worth finding. The lead interviewer stopped her pen mid-sentence. Outside the frosted glass door, Mrs. Porter stood with red eyes, giving me a tiny, solemn nod. When the interview concluded, the district director called me back into the room. Marin, your combined written score and interview ranked highest in the region. Your scholarship is approved. Full tuition, room, board, and medical rehabilitation grants. We've already arranged for a transport van to take you to the state capitol tomorrow morning. I took the official acceptance paper, stamped with a dark blue seal. The paper weighed almost nothing, but my hand trembled as I held it. It was nearly dusk by the time Mrs. Porter dropped me off near the ranch lane. The house was dark. Empty soda cans and paper wrappers from the racetrack concessions littered the kitchen counter. In the living room, sticking out from underneath the rug, was a glossy colored brochure. I leaned down and pulled it free. It was a real estate map for a new suburban housing development in the city school district. On the back, written in my mother's unmistakable looping handwriting, was a note. Celebration dinner for 3 at the steakhouse. Don't tell Marin. When my parents returned the next morning, my mother tossed a brass key onto the table. Her lips were freshly painted with bright red lipstick. Your father and I are taking Cody into the city for a few days to see a doctor and take care of some business, she said, not looking me in the eye. You watch the 200 head of sheep. Don't skimp on the feed, and patch the leak in the barn roof. If I come back and find water damage, you'll answer to me. Lyle strapped a large leather travel bag onto the back of his truck. He caught my eye for a second, his expression hard. Don't go snooping around the house. And don't call that guidance counselor again to embarrass us. Cody sat in the back seat, kicking his heels against the door frame excitedly. Marin, the city apartments have elevators. Mom said I won't ever have to wear muddy boots to school again. Darlene swatted his leg sharply. Keep your mouth shut, Cody. I looked at my mother. What doctor are you taking him to? She adjusted her wool scarf. Cody's eyes have been straining from his online classes. We're getting him fitted for high-end prescription glasses. Just keep the fire burning and clean the pens. Got it. Got it, I said. After the truck drove off, the ranch fell completely silent, save for the low bleating of the sheep in the pens. I dragged a wooden ladder to the side of the barn to fix the roof shingles. My bad foot kept slipping against the rungs. My crutch was propped against the barn wall below. A gust of wind knocked it over into the dirt. I hammered the roof nails in one by one, the vibration jarring all the way up my arm to my teeth. That evening, while sweeping out the living area, I found another slip of paper jammed under the sofa cushion. It was an official intent to purchase document for a 3-bedroom townhome in the city. Primary applicant, Lyle Vance. Dependents, Darlene Vance, Cody Vance. Attached to it was a printed itinerary, a downtown city tour, reservations at a high-end steakhouse, and an order form for Cody's middle school graduation party. The menu listed prime rib, artisanal cakes, and sparkling cider. My name appeared nowhere on any of it. My phone chimed. It was Mrs. Porter. Marin, the formal state paperwork came through. The State Special Education Academy in the capital has accepted your full boarding enrollment. They've already set up an appointment for you at the University Medical Center to check your foot. The state transit grant cleared. A male truck driver will pick you up at the crossroads at 6 tomorrow morning. I pressed the real estate paper flat against my lap. Mrs. Porter, can I go alone? Without my parents' signatures. Mrs. Porter was quiet for a long moment. Yes, Marin. You're 16, and under the State Educational Hardship Act, the academy can take legal guardianship for your schooling. I'll meet you at the station to finalize the paperwork. Thank you, Mrs. Porter. After hanging up, I brought out the small green notebook where I kept track of my odd jobs. Over the years, the money I'd earned embroidering wool blankets for local markets, shearing neighbors' sheep during spring roundups, and the small cash prizes from district academic meets had all been handed over to my mother for household expenses. I sat at the table and calculated every cent. I factored in the cost of the feed I'd tossed this week and subtracted my fair labor wage. When the math was done, there was a balance of $120 left in my favor. I took $120 from my secret stash under the floorboards, set it neatly on the pine table, and weighted it down with the front door key. At midnight, a voice message popped up in the family group chat. My mother's voice came through, background noise from a loud city restaurant clinking in the background. Marin, make sure you patch that roof right. And don't you dare touch the dried beef in the pantry. That's for Cody's lunches. If we get back and see the sheep lost weight, your father's going to take it out of your hide. Lyle's voice followed seconds later. Listen to your mother. A girl shouldn't be spending her time thinking about escaping. We raised you this far. Don't go thinking your wings are tough enough to fly off on your own. Then came a photo from Cody. He was standing in a brightly lit, modern showroom apartment, his Garmin watch glowing on his wrist, my mother beaming beside him. His caption read, Marin, I finally get my own bedroom. I saved the photo to my phone, then took a high-resolution picture of the townhome purchase agreement. At dawn, the sky along the horizon turned a faint, icy gray. A heavy green postal service truck rumbled down the rutted dirt lane, its brakes squealing as it stopped near the gate. The driver rolled down his window. You Marin? Mrs. Porter asked me to give you a lift into the county seat. Hop in. I tossed my canvas bag, containing only 2 changes of clothes and my worn textbooks, into the cab, then pulled myself up using the door frame. Before closing the door, I looked back one last time. The small timber house sat dwarfed against the vast, empty expanse of the frozen plain. The windows were dark. The chimney was cold. It was a place of extinguished fires and silent neglect. A place I had spent years desperately trying to find my way back to, only to realize it had never been mine at all. The cold morning air bit at my cheeks, bringing a sharp sting to my eyes. The postal truck shifted gears, rolling forward. The ranch shrank into a tiny brown dot in the side mirror. I didn't look back again. The heater in the cab of the postal truck smelled like burnt dust and old coffee. The driver, an older man named Pete with gray whiskers and a thermos of chicory brew wedged between the seats, didn't pry. He shifted the heavy manual transmission with a rhythmic clunk every time the road crested a limestone ridge, the tires throwing up sleet against the undercarriage. Porter told me to keep the fan on high, Pete said after 20 miles of flat silence. He reached over and tilted the plastic vent toward my boots. Said you had frostbite on your toes. They're gone, I said, my voice low against the rumble of the diesel engine. Pete's hand hesitated on the gear shift. He looked at the cracked windshield, then spat a plug of tobacco into a paper cup. Well, high planes don't give nothing back once it takes a bite. You got people in the Capitol? No, I answered, watching the telephone poles flick past like fence posts, marking an abandoned section line. Just a school. A school's better than people, Pete muttered. Books don't ask you to work a 4-horse team on a broken leg. We hit the county depot in Blue Basin, just as the sun broke through the gray underbelly of the clouds. Mrs. Porter was already standing on the loading platform, wearing her heavy wool overcoat with the frayed cuffs and holding a cardboard cup of black tea and a ticket envelope. When the truck hissed to a stop, she didn't wait for me to struggle down. Met me at the running board, her hands firm under my elbows, taking the weight off my right heel before the crutch could even strike the gravel. Come inside, she said, her voice shaking slightly despite her stern posture. The regional coach leaves in 15 minutes. I've got your medical ledger and your guardianship decree from Judge Harlan. In the heated waiting room, under the buzzing fluorescent tubes that smelled of damp floor wax, she laid the papers across a wooden bench. Your father called the district office at 7, she said without looking up, her pen checking the boxes on the state transit transfer. He told the superintendent you stole $120 from the feed box and that he was filing a runaway petition. I left the money on the pine table, I said. And the key? Mrs. Porter looked at me then. Her eyes were rimmed with dark, bruised circles, but the iron in her jaw was set tight. I know you did. Judge Harlan signed the temporary emergency ward order at 6:30 this morning based on the clinic's photographs of your foot. Your father can file whatever paper he wants with the county sheriff. The State Educational Hardship Act overrides parental claim when gross medical neglect is entered into the record. She pulled an envelope from her purse and pushed it into my coat pocket. What's this? I asked. 10 years of my teacher's retirement bonus, she said fiercely, cutting off my protest before I could speak. It's $300, Marin. You buy yourself a winter boot that fits whatever the surgeons leave you with. You buy books that don't smell like sheep tallow. And if your mother ever writes you a letter asking for a dime, you give it to the academy dean to burn. The coach air brakes hissed outside. When I hauled myself up the high metal steps of the bus, my bandaged foot throbbed with a dull rhythmic heat, like an ember buried in dry grass. I looked out the smeared window. Mrs. Porter stood on the wet concrete, her arms crossed tight against the wind, watching the bus pull out until the depot vanished into the gray expanse of the lower plains. The Capitol was not made of timber and mud. It was made of wet granite, red brick and dark asphalt that hissed beneath the tires of yellow cabs. The State Academy was located on the western ridge above the river, its 3-story brick dormitories covered in dormant ivy, their tall chimneys puffing clean, white wood smoke into the crisp mountain air. But I did not go to the dormitory first. A transport van with the seal of the State Board of Regents took me directly to the University Medical Center. In the orthopedic clinic on the 4th floor, the radiators hummed with steady, dry steam. Dr. Keller, a woman with graying hair tied back in a leather clip and hands that were warm and clean, cut the blood-crusted gauze away from my right foot with surgical shears. She didn't speak while she worked. When the last layer of yellow dressing peeled back, exposing the clean, raw lines where the 3 smallest toes had been severed and the blackened skin creeping along the outer metatarsal, her breath hitched. Who dressed this? She asked. The county nurse in Blue Basin, I said, gripping the edge of the examination table. She had to do it on the night shift between 2 calving accidents. Dr. Keller adjusted the overhead lamp. The light was so bright it turned the linoleum blue. The bone in the 4th metatarsal is infected. If you had stayed on that ranch another 3 days, the osteomyelitis would have crossed the ankle joint. We would have had to take the foot below the knee. Can I still walk? I asked. She looked up from the wound, her sharp eyes searching my face. She seemed surprised that there were no tears on my cheeks. You will walk. We're taking you into surgery tonight to debride the dead bone and clean the tissue. After That you'll spend 2 weeks on intravenous antibiotics, and then the bioengineering department will cast you for a carbon composite orthotic plate. She stood up, pulling off her latex gloves with a sharp snap. You're 16. Yes. The report from your county counselor says you scored 99 on the state science assessment while suffering from third-degree frostbite. 99.4. I corrected softly. Dr. Keller let out a short, quiet breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Well, Marin Vance, we don't let 99.4s lose their legs to sheep ranch ignorance. Lie back. The ceiling of the operating theater was a maze of chrome pipes and round, white lamps. When the anesthesiologist pressed the clear plastic mask over my nose, the scent of sweet, cold air rushed into my throat. For a second, the darkness looked like the blizzard on the high ridge, the endless, roaring whiteout where the CB radio had crackled with my mother's voice telling me to stop hogging the line. Stop hogging the line, Marin. Cody's streaming his class. Then the drugs took hold, and the storm went dead. Back on the North Ridge 40 miles outside Blue Basin, the thaw came late and mean. Lyle Vance kicked open the door of the ranch house at 2 in the afternoon, his canvas coat stiff with dried mud. Marin, he bellowed, tossing his wet hat onto the woodbox. Get the branding irons out of the shed and stoke the forge. The 3-year-old heifers are breaking through the south drift. The only sound in the house was the low ticking of the wind-up clock on the shelf and the hum of the refrigerator. Darlene came in behind him, carrying a cardboard box from the city department store filled with new blue polo shirts for Cody and a set of leather-bound school binders with brass corners. Where is that girl? Darlene grumbled, setting the box on the kitchen counter. Stove stone cold. Cody's hungry. He wants his soup before his online tutor logs on. Cody trailed behind, his eyes glued to his tablet, the blue Garmin watch on his wrist beeping softly as he cleared a level in a puzzle game. Mom, the Wi-Fi's down again. Did Marin forget to start the generator? Lyle walked into the narrow kitchen nook. The pine table was bare, scrubbed down to the grain. In the center sat the small, brass key to the front door, resting on top of 6 $20 bills held down by an empty rifle cartridge casing. Beside the money lay a single piece of lined paper torn from a school spiral notebook. Lyle picked it up with grease-stained fingers. Feed balance deducted, $80. Shovel labor, 14 days $200. Medical credit from Mrs. Porter, $400. Net remainder returned to household, $120. I am square with this house. Marin. Darlene snatched the paper from his hand, her face turning the color of curdled tallow. What is this nonsense? Square? What does she mean, square? Who's going to milk the 3 jerseys? Who's going to haul the salt blocks out to the lower draw? She went to town, Lyle said, his voice dropping into that low, dangerous tone he used when a colt refused the bit. She's sitting in Porter's office thinking, she can bluff me. Grab your coat, Darlene. We're driving into Blue Basin. The gas is half empty in the truck, Darlene snapped, glaring at the cold stove. And Cody has his math diagnostic at 3. Cody can bring his tablet in the truck, Lyle growled. That girl's got chores to do before sundown. They drove the 40 miles of washboard dirt into Blue Basin in silence, the truck shuddering as it hit the frozen ruts. When they pulled up in front of the district administration building, Lyle didn't bother using the gravel path. He stomped through the melting slush straight into the superintendent's office. Superintendent Harris, a heavy-set man with spectacles resting on his belly, was reviewing the spring budget when the door banged open. Where is she? Lyle demanded, leaning both palms on the desk. You tell Porter to bring my daughter out right now. She's 16 years old, she belongs on our ranch, and she's got livestock to tend. Harris looked up slowly, removing his glasses. He pulled a thick manila folder from the drawer and laid it flat between them. Mr. Vance, Harris said, his voice completely flat. If you take 2 steps further into this office, Sheriff Miller is waiting in the corridor to serve you with a restraining order issued by the state circuit court. A restraining order? Darlene shrieked from the doorway, her hands clutching her designer handbag. On her own parents? We fed that girl for 16 years. We clothed her. She stole our money and ran off with that busybody guidance counselor. Harris opened the file. He flipped past the academic transcripts and laid 3 glossy 8x10 color photographs on the desk. They were the clinical intake pictures of Marin's right foot, taken under the bright lights of the Blue Basin emergency room. The black, necrotic flesh of the 3 dead toes was clearly visible, along with the deep, purple streaks of sepsis climbing toward the ankle bone. Lyle's eyes flickered. He looked away, his mouth tightening. That's just a winter scrape, Darlene stammered, though her voice lost half its volume. Kids on ranches get frostbite all the time. She didn't say it was that bad. She was just being dramatic to get out of shoveling. The state medical examiner in the capital classified this as third-degree felonious neglect resulting in permanent bodily disfigurement, Harris said, his voice cold enough to freeze water. The State Board of Education has assumed legal guardianship under the emergency provisions of the Hardship Act. Marin Vance is no longer your dependent, Mr. Vance. Her records are sealed. Her address is protected. If you or your wife attempt to contact her, the state attorney has instructions to file criminal charges within 24 hours. Lyle's face turned from red to an ashen, mottled gray. She's my blood. You can't steal a man's child with a piece of paper. You lost her when you left her in the snow while your son streamed a math lesson, Harris said, closing the folder with a sharp, heavy slap. Now get out of my office before I have Miller put you in the county jail. The room on the third floor of the girls' dormitory at the State Academy smelled of lemon oil, old books, and steam heat. My bed was narrow, but the mattress was 3 inches thick and covered in clean, heavy cotton sheets that didn't smell of sheep tallow or kerosene. Beside the bed stood a solid oak desk with a brass gooseneck lamp that cast a warm golden circle over my open calculus textbook. My right foot was encased in a sleek, black carbon fiber brace that slipped inside a custom-made leather Oxford shoe. The brace held my heel rigid and had a spring-loaded toe pad that rolled forward when I took a step, mimicking the balance my missing metatarsals could no longer provide. I didn't limp. If I walked slowly with my back straight and my shoulders square, no one in the hall could tell that half my right foot was made of carbon and foam. Marin. A voice called from the doorway. It was Nora, my roommate, a quiet girl from the Iron Range whose father had died in a mine collapse, leaving her to study metallurgy on a state scholarship. Held 2 metal trays from the dining hall. They had roasted chicken tonight, Nora said, setting a tray on my desk. And real butter. Not that margarine tubs they had last week. I looked at the plate. A thick roasted chicken breast, steamed green beans with garlic, and 2 hot, flaky biscuits steaming in the cool evening air. I picked up the fork. For the first 6 months at the academy, I had hidden bread rolls in the bottom drawer of my desk, wrapped in paper napkins, terrified that the kitchen would suddenly close or that someone would tell me I hadn't shoveled enough manure to earn my dinner. It had taken Nora 3 months to convince me that the food in the pantry was free, that the meals were served 3 times a day, and that no one was keeping a tally on a slate board behind the door. You finished the telemetry project? Nora asked, pulling her chair up to her desk. The sensor array is done, I said, pointing to the circuit breadboard sitting beside my notebook. It monitors the moisture content of topsoil across a 5-mile grid using low-frequency radio waves. If the temperature drops below freezing while the soil is dry, it triggers an automated valve to flood the roots before the frost can heave the seedlings. Nora whistled softly. The Department of Agriculture is going to buy that off you before you graduate. I don't want to sell it to the department, I said softly, looking out the tall, arched window at the city lights twinkling in the valley below. I want to license it to the state cooperative, so the small farms don't have to hire spotters during the spring freeze. My phone buzzed on the blotter. It was an official notification from the State Department of Revenue. Dear Ms. Vance, pursuant to your application for independent minor status and educational emancipation, your tax identification number has been decoupled from Lyle and Darlene Vance. All future royalty distributions and state grant disbursements will be deposited directly into your individual trust account. I pressed the screen flat against the desk. Through the floorboards, the radiator clanked with steady, reliable warmth. I closed my eyes and breathed in the smell of clean paper, black ink, and roasted meat. I had survived the winter. On the high plains, the winter of the following year was dry, brittle, and merciless. Lyle Vance stood in the middle of the lower paddock, his breath freezing in his graying beard. Around him, 70 head of yearling ewes huddled against the barbed wire fence, their wool ragged and caked with dried mud. Cody, Lyle roared toward the tractor. Get the winch hook around that axle. The damn trailer's sinking into the alkali. Cody, now 14, stood by the rear wheel wearing a $200 down parka that was already torn at the elbow. His hands, pale and soft inside expensive shearling gloves, were shaking. I can't reach it, Dad. Cody whined, his voice high and thin in the wind. The mud's over my boots. It's too cold. Get in there and hook it. Lyle barked, kicking a frozen clod of dirt against the tire. You've been playing on that screen all morning. If we don't get these sheep to the auction block by 4, the bank's calling the note on the baler. Cody took 2 steps into the black mud, slipped on an icy ledge and fell heavily onto his side, dropping the steel hook with a wet splash. He sat in the slush, screaming in frustration, clutching his wrist. I hurt my arm. Mom. Darlene came hurrying from the kitchen porch, her apron flapping, her slippers soaking through with brown runoff. Lyle Stop screaming at him. He's just a boy. He's got an online interview with the Prep Academy in the city tomorrow. Prep Academy? Lyle spat, his face purple with rage. With what money, Darlene? We lost 40 lambs during the blizzard because nobody stayed in the barn to stoke the heater. The sheep shed roof caved in last month because you couldn't be bothered to shovel the snow off the timber. That was Marin's job. Darlene shrieked back, her voice shrill and cracked like dry cedar. You're the man of this house. Why didn't you fix the roof? Because I'm one man doing the work of four. Lyle shouted, his chest heaving. When Marin was here, the fences were mended before the frost. The water troughs were chopped out by 5 in the morning. The books were balanced so we didn't get audited by the feed cooperative. He pointed a thick, trembling finger at Cody, who was still sitting in the mud, crying into his down sleeve. He got 60 on his algebra again. Lyle roared. The prep school in the city laughed at his transcript. They said he couldn't even qualify for the vocational track without remedial tutoring. We spent $6,000 on that fancy watch and those online tutors, and he can't even hook a winch to a tractor. Axel. Darlene stood frozen in the mud, her face white. For 2 years, they had told themselves that Marin was just an extra mouth, a sullen girl who took up space that belonged to their son. They had believed that, without her, the ranch would run smoother, that Cody would soar into the high circles of the city, that the Vance name would be carried into comfortable offices where men wore clean shoes and sat under electric lights. Instead, the house on the North Ridge had become a ruin. The timber rafters in the barn were sagging under the weight of unmanaged rot. The sheep were sick with fluke, because no one knew how to mix the drenching solution Marin used to brew in the copper kettle. The bank had sent 3 notices of default on the new pickup truck Lyle had bought to drive Cody to the city. And on the kitchen table, the glossy brochure for the suburban townhouse in the capital sat covered in dust, grease, and unpaid utility bills. Cody stood up, his expensive blue jacket smeared with black manure, his face streaked with tears. I hate this ranch. I hate the sheep. Marin was supposed to do this. Why did you let her leave? Lyle stared at his son. For the first time in his life, he saw the boy clearly, not a prince destined for great things, but a soft, helpless parasite who couldn't survive 20 minutes on open ground without someone holding his hand. Lyle turned his back on them both, picked up the heavy steel hook from the mud, and dragged it toward the axle himself. His hip screamed with arthritis, the hip Marin used to rub with camphor oil every evening after she finished the dishes. The wind howled down from the high peaks, cold, empty, and completely indifferent. 2 years later, the grand exhibition hall of the State Agricultural Convention Center in the capital was a sea of light, chrome, and polished cedar. Over 5,000 farmers, university researchers, corporate investors, and state officials moved between the booths under massive banners celebrating the centennial of state technical innovation. At the center of the main pavilion, beneath the blue and gold seal of the Governor's Council on Rural Development, stood the demonstration platform for the Vance Porter Automated Soil Monitoring Array. I stood behind the walnut podium, wearing a tailored navy blazer, dark wool trousers, and my polished black orthotics. My hair was pulled back in a neat, professional braid. My posture was straight, balanced, and effortless. By utilizing low-frequency pulse telemetry, I explained into the microphone, my voice calm, resonant, and carrying effortlessly across the crowded hall. The array reduces water consumption by 35% while providing real-time frost warning 72 hours prior to subsurface root freezing. It requires 0 satellite subscription fees, making it accessible to family ranches operating under 200 acres. The crowd of engineers and cooperative directors broke into warm, sustained applause. Governor Hayes stepped onto the platform, his hand outstretched, holding a heavy walnut plaque mounted with a bronze medal. On behalf of the state of Montana and the Board of Regents, the governor said, smiling for the bank of press cameras, "It is my honor to award the State Youth Innovation Fellowship to Miss Marin Vance. With this award comes a 4-year, full research stipend to the University College of Engineering." Flashbulbs popped in rapid succession, casting bright, clean reflections against the glass display cases. I took the plaque. It was heavy, cool to the touch, and bore my name etched in deep, permanent bronze. As the crowd began to disperse toward the reception hall, 3 figures emerged from the back of the pavilion, shuffling hesitantly past the security ropes. Lyle Vance wore his best Western suit, but the collar was frayed and the elbows were shiny with wear. He had lost 30 pounds. His skin hung loose around his neck, and his beard was entirely white. Beside him stood Darlene, wearing an old polyester dress that was 2 sizes too large, her eyes darting nervously around the gleaming marble hall like a trapped animal. Behind them, Cody, now 16, stood slouched in an ill-fitting sports coat, his eyes fixed on the carpet, his fingers nervously twisting the strap of his old Garmin watch. The screen cracked and dark, its battery long since dead. I handed the bronze plaque to Nora, who was standing by the display terminal, with Mrs. Porter. "Give me 2 minutes," I whispered to Mrs. Porter. Mrs. Porter looked at the 3 people standing near the rope. Her jaw tightened, but she gave me a gentle, confident nod. "We're right here, Marin." I stepped down from the platform. The carbon fiber insert in my right shoe clicked softly against the polished granite floor, a clean, precise sound. Lyle took a step forward, his hands trembling as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a battered, grease-stained leather wallet. "Marin," he rasped, his voice rough as gravel in a dry creek bed. I stopped 4 feet from him. I did not cross my arms. I did not frown. I simply looked at him with the calm, detached curiosity one might offer a stranger asking for directions at a bus depot. "Mr. Vance," I said. Darlene let out a sharp, choked gasp, taking a half-step forward before Lyle caught her arm. "Marin, baby," Darlene whimpered, her hands fluttering toward her chest. "Look at you. You're on the stage. With the governor." "Yes," I said. "We saw the article in the State Farmer," Lyle said, his eyes dropping to my shoes, then flickering away as if the sight burned him. They said. The state bought the patent rights for $50,000. And a full ride to the university. The cooperative licensed the manufacturing rights, I corrected evenly. The trust manages the funds." Lyle swallowed hard, his throat moving convulsively. He looked around the vast, warm, brightly lit hall, then back at me. "The ranch is going to auction in June, Marin," he said, the words falling out of him like heavy stones. "The bank called the second mortgage. We owe $18,000 on the winter feed bill. If we don't clear the balance by Friday, the sheriff's putting the padlock on the front gate." He reached out, his thick, callous fingers hovering in the air between us, not quite daring to touch the wool of my blazer. "We're your family, Marin," he whispered, his eyes rimmed with red, desperate veins. "Blood is blood. You can't let your brother end up on the county dole. We made mistakes, but we raised you. We gave you 16 years under our roof." I looked at him. I looked at Darlene, whose eyes were fixed hungrily on the bronze medal resting on the table behind me. I looked at Cody, who couldn't even lift his head to meet my gaze, his shoulders hunched in the same posture I had worn for 16 years while standing in the cold hallway waiting for a scrap of gristle. I felt no rage. I felt no burning desire to throw their cruelty back into their faces. I felt only the vast, clean emptiness of the winter plains after the storm has passed. "When I was 16, I said, my voice quiet, smooth and utterly immovable, I walked 4 miles on broken, dying bone through the snow to reach the highway." Lyle flinched as if I had struck him with a quirt. "You had a snowmobile in the shed," I continued, looking directly into his eyes. "You had a truck with a full tank of gas. You had a thermos of hot soup, a GPS watch and a map tucked into Cody's pocket." I glanced at Cody. The boy shrank back another half step, staring at his boots. "You told me to follow the fence line," I said. "You told me that if I had eyes, I could look at the stars." I reached into my blazer pocket, pulled out a small brass business card holder, and extracted a single card. On it was printed the contact information for the State Legal Aid Society for Rural Hardship. I laid the card on the edge of the velvet rope between us. "Follow the fence line, Mr. Vance," I said softly. "You have eyes. Look at the stars." I turned my back on them. "Marin," Darlene shrieked behind me, her voice breaking into frantic, ugly sobs. "Marin, you ungrateful little bitch. We gave you life. You owe us." 2 state security officers stepped smoothly between Darlene and the platform, their hands resting politely on their utility belts. "Ma'am," the senior officer said firmly, "you need to step back from the exhibition floor." I did not turn around. I walked up the platform steps, took Mrs. Porter's arm and smiled as we walked toward the banquet hall. Behind me, through the double glass doors of the convention center, the vast sky of the northern plains stretched out toward the horizon, broad, clear, and bright, with an infinite, unmapped future. And for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the compass.